Hi, I'm Atalanta. No, not the city in Georgia. And no, not named after some Greek goddess by mistake. My mom said it was unique, like a charm she could show off, but never truly value. Let me tell you a story that starts with a bow, a shiny box, and the moment I realized I wasn't part of family the way I thought I was. It was Christmas morning, the kind with snow so clean and fresh, it looked like it belonged in a Hallmark movie. The house smelled like cinnamon rolls and that overpriced pine-scented candle Mom loved. Strings of fairy lights flickered across the living room, wrapping the fireplace in that warm glow you see in family commercials. Picture perfect, if you didn't zoom in. Boxes were stacked under the tree, neatly labeled with names: Avery, Dylan, Chloe, Julian. And then, a much smaller one, tucked behind the tree leg. My name, misspelled. Again. To Atalanta. I didn't correct it. I never do anymore. All right, let's do this! Dad clapped, holding his phone up, recording. Open them at the same time. 1, 2, 3. Avery squealed. No way! You got me the Pro Max? Check it out! Julian shouted, flipping his iPad box. It's the latest one, with the pencil. Even Chloe, the self-proclaimed minimalist, looked touched as she unfolded the check. $5,000. This is unexpected. And then there was me. I slowly peeled the wrapping off a box the size of a paperback. Inside, a wool scarf, beige, worn, moth-bitten at the ends. Your grandmother knitted that, Mom said without looking at me. It's vintage. Not even a smile, not even eye contact. Just a shrug, as if she was ticking off a chore on her mental list. My throat clenched. Thanks, I whispered, running my fingers over the frayed tassels. I kept the smile, but my chest, it felt like it was shrinking inward. Like I was disappearing, one ignored moment at a time. Later that night, I stood in the hallway upstairs, the scarf folded on my lap, watching them laugh through the cracked door. They were playing some game, Mom pouring wine, Dad toasting to a successful year, the others cheering like some beautiful functional unit. I wasn't in the photo, then I heard them. I wasn't supposed to. She's too cold sometimes, Dad said. Never really clicked with her. She's smart, yeah, but aloof. Always on her own. It's hard to love someone who doesn't try back, Mom replied, as if analyzing a roommate, not her daughter. I froze. It's hard to love someone who doesn't try back. They didn't know I stayed up late studying, so I wouldn't be a burden. That I never asked for birthday parties because they always got canceled last minute. That I pretended not to care because caring made the silence louder. That night, I wrote the first entry in what I later called the cold ledger. Page 1, December 25th. Everyone got tech. I got scraps and silence. 3 days later, I used my babysitting money to buy a used Kindle off Craigslist. Not to read novels, but to start something I didn't even know had a name yet. Data collection. Memories, receipts, phrases, forgotten birthdays. Every slight, every shrug, every time they smiled bigger at someone else. Not for revenge, not yet. But I knew, deep down, if I didn't write it down, they'd gaslight me out of my own childhood. The silence after that Christmas stayed with me. Not like an echo, but more like a bruise. One you forget about until you brush against it, and then suddenly, it hurts all over again. In January, the snow was still thick on the streets, but the warmth in our house was like stale breath. Everything looked cozy to the outside world. Golden lighting, polite dinner chatter, the occasional forced hug for Instagram. But the emotional temperature in our home had dropped far below freezing. You just had to pay attention. After school one Tuesday, I walked into the kitchen to find Chloe waving her ring in Mom's face like it was a crown. It's 3 carats, she beamed, and we're doing Napa Valley for the bachelorette weekend. Oh, honey, you deserve it, Mom cooed, after everything you've been through. I stood by the fridge, holding my physics textbook. No one asked how my midterms went. I was still wearing the same black hoodie I'd had on for 2 days. Not a word. I opened the fridge. A single post-it was stuck to the milk. Atalanta, use this up before Saturday. Like a roommate reminder, not a mother's note. Later that evening, I found out why. Chloe was getting another loan from my parents. $8,000? For what? Designer shoes for the wedding party? It's a brand investment, she explained to Dad. But what about the college fund Grandma left me? I asked, my voice cool, flat. Mom stirred her tea. Sweetie, we're not taking it from your account. It's all the same pool. We're one family. No, I replied. You're a business, and I didn't agree to invest. They laughed, as if I had cracked a joke. I went upstairs, opened my drawer, and pulled out the cold ledger. Page after page. Dates, comments, bank transactions. What started as emotional journaling had become something more. An archive. A record of patterns that no one else would validate. Until now. By February, I'd been accepted into 5 of the top STEM prep programs in the state. I was scheduled to speak at a regional youth science conference. Chloe's only accomplishment that month? Choosing the flavor of her wedding cake. Still, the entire house was buzzing with her excitement. I came home from school one day to find my old laptop missing. I tore through my room, checked under the bed, in the laundry, even the attic. Gone. I asked Mom. Oh, I gave it to Dylan. He needed one for his music stuff. Mom, all my designs and app prototypes were on there, all my schoolwork. Well, maybe next time back it up. She didn't even blink. Later that week, the district hosted its annual academic honors night. I was named Young Engineer of the Year. It felt big, validating. But as I walked onto the stage, I looked out at the seats saved for my family. Empty. After the ceremony, Mr. Hensley, my engineering teacher, handed me the plaque. They couldn't make it? I shook my head. They're busy. Wedding prep. He hesitated, then offered a small smile. Sometimes the most brilliant minds come from quiet corners. I held on to those words like they were scripture. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at the local 24-hour diner until sunrise. I didn't cry. I didn't drink coffee. I just sat in a corner booth, headphones in, watching the parking lot empty and refill again. My phone buzzed once. Avery. Mom says be back before 8. She needs help steam pressing Chloe's veil. That was the moment. The click. The still, sharp moment when grief transforms into fire. I knew then, I would never get from them what I needed. And if I wanted peace, power, or even a future, I'd have to build it myself, not ask for it. The next morning, I filed for access to my own banking information and began the paperwork to open a separate student account. I requested all documents linked to Grandma's will and my education savings. I wanted to see what they'd taken. Legally. I also made an appointment with a local attorney to inquire about financial autonomy. She asked if I was being abused. I said, no, not like that. She looked confused. So I clarified. It's not bruises, it's absences. It's being erased in real time. Ah, she nodded. The slow kind of bleeding. Exactly. At school, I stopped trying to join conversations. I worked on a prototype app that calculated emotional labor, a psychological tool designed to track time, effort, and mental cost in relationships. Nobody else knew about it. Not even the teachers. In the evenings, when Chloe was parading dress options and Julian blasted music downstairs, I sat cross-legged on my bed with code on my screen and metrics on my mind. If they wouldn't notice me, they'd still feel me, eventually. In ways they'd never see coming, the spring after Chloe's wedding was unusually cold. Not metaphorically. I mean, literally. The air carried this damp bitterness that settled into your skin and clung like second thoughts. And yet, the ground was shifting. Not just under the weather, but under me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was engineering my escape, and more importantly, my arrival. I had been accepted into a summer program at a top-tier tech institute out of state. Not MIT, not yet. But the kind of place where you don't just learn how to build apps, you learn how to build systems, economies, influence. I didn't tell anyone, especially not my parents. I packed quietly, left early in the morning with a single duffel, and texted Mom from the airport. Gone for summer research. Be back in August. No response, but I saw that the message was read. That silence? It was confirmation. A green light, permission in reverse. The dorms were clean and bare. White walls, beige floors. Minimalist, but freeing. I shared the space with two other women, one coding prodigy from NYC, another a robotics champion from Arizona. For the first time in years, I wasn't the weird girl who stayed quiet at dinner. I was just Atalanta, the one who could debug a neural network in 20 minutes flat. And for once, I wasn't invisible. I was intimidating. But underneath the academic rush, something else stirred. One evening, after hours of lab simulation work, I sat on the rooftop overlooking the city skyline. Cold wind, blinking lights, and a low hum of traffic. That's when Mila, my roommate from New York, joined me. "You code like someone's chasing you," she said, half laughing. "Maybe I am," I replied. She looked at me and asked the question no one in my family ever did. "Are you okay?" There was a pause. The kind that opens space inside you didn't know needed air. "I'm learning how to be," I said. That summer, I created a prototype app called Halo. It was disguised as a mental wellness tracker, but used machine learning to analyze patterns in interpersonal behavior, essentially mapping emotional labor and microaggressions within households and teams. The beta testers thought it was a self-care tool, but I knew what it really was: a silent record keeper, a digital version of the cold ledger. And in the evenings, while my cohort watched Netflix or played Cards Against Humanity, I was applying for EIN numbers, studying tech startup law, and building financial infrastructure under the pseudonym A. Techna. I knew better than to use my real name, especially when part of me still feared my parents might try to take credit. Or worse, control. By the end of the summer, I had secured my first investor, an anonymous angel backer through a female-led VC group in San Francisco. The money wasn't much at first, just enough to build infrastructure and secure trademarks, but the idea had legs, strong ones. I returned home in August with a version of Halo already quietly circulating in beta communities for burnout support. My family didn't notice I'd been gone. Not really. Chloe had moved to Chicago. Julian was living in the basement again, between projects. Dad's car was missing a hubcap, and Mom had started keeping wine in the bathroom. And still, no one asked me how my summer went. 3 weeks later, we were at a backyard barbecue for Avery's graduation. Everyone was talking about her marketing degree like she'd cured cancer. Someone asked Dad, "So what's Atalanta up to these days?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "She's still playing with her little apps. No idea what that'll turn into." I didn't respond. I just sipped my lemonade and texted my developer, "Push V1.4 live. Upgrade sentiment tracking." 5 minutes later, the app was live in 800 new user accounts. The twist? That same week, Dad, always the entrepreneur, invested in a revolutionary emotional health tech startup he'd heard about from a networking friend. The startup, Halo, the founder, Techna. He never asked who was behind it, and I never told him. Coming home didn't feel like returning. It felt more like walking into a stage set where the lighting was slightly off and the actors had forgotten half their lines. The house hadn't changed. Same pale beige walls, same smell of lavender and lemon cleaner, same distant tension humming under every smile. But I was no longer the shadow lurking in corners, waiting to be noticed. I was the architect of an empire none of them knew existed. And the silence this time? It was deliberate. Mom greeted me with a thin smile when I walked through the door. "You're just in time," she said. "Julian's birthday is this weekend. Don't forget to RSVP on the family group chat." I stood in the foyer, backpack still on my shoulders. I'm already here. Do I need to RSVP to exist now? She blinked. Don't be dramatic. I looked past her into the living room. Dad was on his laptop, reading over stock updates, probably chasing another investment opportunity. I recognized the layout of the page. It was Halo's dashboard, newly updated, embedded into the health and wellness site he subscribed to. Still didn't know it was mine. He glanced up. Hey, stranger. No hug, no real glance. Just a passing acknowledgement, like I was a house guest. They still didn't ask what I'd been working on, what I'd built, what I'd become. In my room, nothing had moved. Dust still clung to the top shelf. The cold air tasted like abandonment. I dropped my bag, pulled out my laptop, and logged into Halo's backend. Usage had doubled. The emotional mapping AI had flagged over 700 new instances of burnout indicators across user families. Ironically, my parents' profiles, shadow-generated from public social media interactions, were trending toward high manipulation plus emotional negligence. Avery had posted something that made it into the tracker. My sister's back. I forgot how weird she is when she talks about apps no one cares about. I saved the quote, tagged it. Another line for the ledger. That Saturday, I stood in the corner of Julian's birthday party like a ghost in my own family. They rented out the backyard, strung fairy lights between trees, hired a bartender. Dad wore his weekend polo. Mom mingled like she was hosting a charity gala. Julian, fresh off another failed EP release, told everyone he was in talks with Spotify. I was sipping a soda when Uncle Ray, Dad's brother, cornered me. You still doing that app thing? He asked, friendly but dismissive. Yeah, I said. It's doing all right. He chuckled. You should talk to your dad. He just poured $5,000 into some emotion-detecting app. Thinks it'll blow up. I smiled without moving my mouth. That's so? Yeah, something called… What was it? Halo. Ever heard of it? Can't say I have, I said. But it sounds promising. Later that night, I pulled Mom aside as she refilled the wine cooler. Did you ever wonder, I said, what it'd be like if you had 5 kids, but only 4 of them mattered? She froze, bottle in hand. What are you talking about? I'm saying, maybe if you loved me a little less like a footnote, I wouldn't have built an entire business around documenting emotional neglect. Her jaw tightened. You think you're special because you learned to code? I stepped closer. I think I'm free because I learned not to need you. The twist came Monday morning. Dad barged into my room, furious. Did you know this Halo app just issued a public statement? They're pulling out of private partnerships. Something about ethical concerns? I nodded. They're restructuring to protect against exploitative use. New terms of service. He threw a printout on the desk. It was his investment contract, now void. You cost me money. You invested in emotional health, I said. You just didn't realize you were part of the test group. His eyes narrowed. You're behind this? I didn't confirm. I didn't need to. The emails came next, from reporters, podcasters, mental health groups wanting to interview A. Techna, the mysterious female founder who launched a digital revolution. I said yes to one, but not the ones my family would see. This wasn't about gloating. This was about shifting the narrative, from the forgotten daughter to the architect of accountability. It was easy to leave the house this time. No slammed doors, no melodramatic exits. Just one last quiet look at the home where I was raised to be small. Then a drive to the airport under a gray sky that never once apologized for not being blue. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the dangerous part. Anger makes noise. Stillness is when the real change begins. A month passed. Halo's soft relaunch rolled out across more than 30 states, tailored now for young adults navigating high-conflict homes. I rebranded the interface, filtered out the Avert family mapping tool, and turned the ledger idea into an anonymous journaling module that could flag patterns in a user's inner circle. Quietly, ethically, and without confrontation. It didn't name the villains. It helped people name themselves again. The downloads quadrupled in 10 days. Then came the news article. Not a feature, not yet. Just a small blurb in a tech column. Mysterious startup Halo, led by pseudonymous founder A Techna, shows unusual user traction. Rumored to be created by a female founder under 25, the tool is shaking up wellness tech. The ripple effect began. Small podcasts reached out, independent blogs, and I said yes, but only to the ones that asked the right questions. Not, what inspired this, but, what systems do you hope to dismantle? Meanwhile, back home, the emails started. Subject: Call me. From Elaine Carter. Body: Your dad's retirement account took a hit. Not sure what's going on. Can you help? I didn't reply. 2 days later, a text from Chloe. Mom said you're some kind of tech ghost. What's happening? Also, Julian moved out again. Can you Venmo him for his phone bill? Then another from Dad. This thing you're doing, is it really necessary? I wasn't sure what he meant by thing. Holding boundaries? Not financing dysfunction? Building something real without seeking their approval? Yes, it was necessary. I drafted a reply. Never hit send. Then came the tipping point. Mom showed up at my apartment in the city. I opened the door to find her in a camel coat and sunglasses, like she was visiting out of obligation. Not shame, not love. Image management. She didn't hug me. You're really not going to help? She asked. Help how? Your father's account. I'm not a safety net, Mom. You're his daughter. And he was my father. When it mattered. She paused. This is still your family. No, I said. This was my first trauma response. There's a difference. She looked like she wanted to cry. But even that felt performative. Before she left, she whispered, You always wanted to be above us. I closed the door without saying a word. 2 weeks later, I started the paperwork to move Halo's parent company to a full non-profit division. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about changing the story. We launched the Forgotten Fund, a scholarship under Halo's umbrella, designed specifically for students from emotionally negligent homes. No essays, no family tax data, just a personal timeline and a statement of autonomy. In the first week, we received over 9,000 applications. I read 20 before bed that night. One stood out. I used to think being ignored was better than being abused. Now I know both are violent. Thank you for making space for the quiet kids. I cried for the first time in months. Not out of grief, but relief. It started with a knock, not on my door, but in my inbox, a forwarded email from a contact at a local real estate group I'd met through a Halo conference panel. The subject line read, Foreclosure, 18 Quarry Hill Drive, Carter Residence. The body of the email was brief. Attached was the notice. The house I grew up in, the one with the uneven stone walkway and the dying hydrangeas Mom never watered, was going up for sale. At first, I felt nothing. No vindication, no thrill, just quiet. And then, I started making calls. The property had already attracted interest, mostly from regional investors, and a few developers looking to flip and rezone the lot. One offer stood out, a cash bid from a known house flipping firm. I submitted my own offer that afternoon, through A Techna Holdings, LLC, cash, as is, expedited closing, slightly under market value, but laced with speed and finality that most buyers couldn't match. I knew they'd take it. The deal closed in 11 days. I didn't tell anyone. I let the paperwork settle, let the ink dry. Then, on the final day of their move-out period, I showed up. It was early afternoon. The street was quiet. The trees still leaned over the yard like they'd been holding their breath for a decade. The front door was wide open, boxes stacked on the porch. I stood at the curb, dressed in black jeans, a windbreaker, sunglasses. Neutral. Controlled. They didn't notice me until I stepped onto the grass. Dad was dragging a box labeled Kitchen Misc across the lawn. Mom stood near the U-Haul, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. When Dad looked up and saw me, his expression flickered. Recognition, confusion, then forced warmth. Atalanta, Didn't expect to see you today. I gave a small nod. I'm here on behalf of the new property owner. He paused. Wait. What? I reached into my bag and handed him a thick envelope. Lease agreement, 1-year term, market rate rent, deposit due today. Late fee applies after 5 days. He opened it, skimmed the pages, face draining. You bought the house? No, I said. I acquired it. Through a legally formed entity. Everything's in the file. Mom walked over, snatched the packet from him. This is a joke. You're joking. Her hands trembled slightly. She scanned the signature line. A. Techna Holdings. She looked up at me like she was seeing a ghost. This is your doing? I kept my voice even. You needed a landlord. I applied. We're your family, she said sharply. Like that alone should be currency. No, I said. You're my former landlords. The new arrangement has terms. They didn't sign the lease. They couldn't. Their pride wouldn't allow it, even if their bank account did. 3 days later, they were gone. They moved into a condo 2 towns over. Small, beige, forgettable. I saw the listing online. 2-bedroom starter with limited sunlight and no basement. Fitting. I didn't visit. The property sat vacant for 2 months. During that time, I repainted the inside. Not personally, I hired a crew. But I picked the colors. Clean whites, soft charcoal, cool oak flooring. I removed the heavy curtains Mom had insisted made the place classy. Tore down the tacky wallpaper in the powder room. Replaced the light fixtures. Then I did something no one expected. I opened the house as a pilot program for Halo's next phase, a transitional residential resource for emotionally displaced youth. Not runaway teens, not wards of the court, just people like me, invisible, overlooked, tactfully erased. The program was called Threshold. The first resident arrived on a Friday. Jenna, 19, had been couch surfing since her parents cut her off for being too intense. She was a robotics major, read philosophy at night, had a stutter when she got nervous, but her mind ran cleaner code than anyone I'd met. She cried when she saw the space. I've never had a room with my own lamp, she whispered, stroking the wall. That night, I sat in what used to be my bedroom, now converted into a writing nook, and added a new entry to my private ledger. Final acquisition complete. First healing initiated. Meanwhile, the Carter family went dark. No calls, no texts. But I saw the shifts. Julian posted vague tweets about toxic people pretending to be heroes. Chloe shared an Instagram story about narcissists who build empires off trauma. Avery sent a single message. Was any of it real to you? I didn't reply, because she was asking the wrong question. 2 weeks later, a local paper ran a piece titled, Former Family Home Becomes Refuge for Neglected Youth. They didn't name me. I didn't ask for that. But word spread, quietly, efficiently, and it reached the only inbox that still mattered. Mom's. She sent me one line. Why are you doing this? I typed, paused, and deleted 5 versions of a reply before I finally landed on, because you never did. I never heard back. And that silence? It finally sounded like peace. The first time someone recognized me on the street, I panicked. It wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet barista in a Brooklyn cafe who placed my tray on the counter and said, I read your piece in Mindframe Quarterly. I think you saved my little sister's life. I nodded, barely managing a smile before ducking out into the freezing February air. Fame was never the goal, and in truth, I hadn't used my full name in the article, just A. Techna, the pseudonym that had grown a mythology of its own. But people were starting to connect the dots. A few months earlier, I'd been invited to deliver a TEDx talk at a university in Seattle. The title of my session was deliberately vague, The Science of Not Being Chosen. I told the story, anonymized, coded in metaphor, of growing up as the invisible node in a family network optimized for spotlighting everyone else, of learning to reverse engineer pain into pattern recognition, of building a tool, not to punish, but to empower. of finding the data that made gaslighting unravel under its own weight. After the talk, someone in the crowd stood up and asked, "So what happened to the people who erased you?" I paused, looked right at them. They stayed small. I just stopped shrinking to fit. Applause came slow, then thundered. Back in New York, Halo was no longer just an app. It had evolved into an ecosystem: journals, AI-driven empathy training for therapists, a safe messaging platform for high school counselors, and Threshold, the housing initiative, now in 3 cities. But for every article that praised the mission, there were murmurs too. Whispers that I'd fabricated my story, that no real family could be that cruel, that I must be embellishing for clout. My inbox filled with both thank you letters and accusations. One email caught my eye. "If this is really you and not some PR gimmick, show us the name. Let them see who they tried to break." The message was unsigned. For 2 days, I didn't sleep. I toggled between hiding and hunger, the desperate ache for truth to breathe without retaliation. Then I did it. I wrote a piece. It wasn't long, just under 1,200 words. Titled simply, "Her Name Was Atalanta." I published it under my real name. I detailed not the worst offenses, but the quietest ones: the birthday parties skipped, the gifts misnamed, the way silence was used like a leash. And I ended with this: "My family didn't ruin me. They just taught me what not to repeat. I used to want revenge. Now I want reach. I used to want justice. Now I want joy. For others like me, who are still sitting at the dinner table, wondering why the love never made it to their plate." It went viral. By summer, the Forgotten Fund had over 50,000 applicants. We opened a physical headquarters, not sleek or high-tech, but warm. Repurposed hardwood floors, exposed brick, cozy chairs. No whiteboards, just stories. One afternoon, a letter came in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. "I've been you. Not just once. Repeatedly. I have a 14-year-old daughter now. I used to think I had to become the mother mine wasn't. Now I just want to be the safe place she never has to run from. Thank you for reminding me that's enough." I cried at my desk silently. Then I added a quote to the wall of the HQ, a quote from my own TED Talk. "Legacy isn't about being remembered. It's about remembering others." I hadn't spoken to my parents in over a year. Then, one day, I got a voicemail from a new number. "Hi, it's your father. I don't even know why I'm calling. I guess I just wondered if we could talk. I heard what you did. I didn't know, I didn't see, and I don't expect anything. Just thought I'd say that." Click, no apology, no admission, just a voice. Reaching. Too late. I didn't call back, but I did write a letter, not to them, to myself. I sealed it in an envelope and tucked it behind a photo on my bookshelf. A picture of the Threshold home's first 4 residents standing under the porch light, arms slung over each other's shoulders like real siblings. The letter read, "You were never too much. They were just never enough." One morning, while prepping a presentation for a social impact summit, I saw a headline flash across my feed. Atalanta Carter named among Time's 100 most influential people in mental health advocacy. The article was gracious. The quote they chose was mine. "Some of us weren't raised. We were just tolerated until we learned to vanish. But we came back, louder, softer, better." I stared at the screen for a while, then shut the laptop. The sun was warm through the window. Outside, Jenna was helping a new resident unload books from a donated box. One of the titles fell open. A copy of Jane Eyre, spine worn, notes in the margin. I smiled. I had learned how to narrate my story. But more importantly, I'd stopped letting anyone else hold the pen. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: being forgotten doesn't make you invisible. It just gives you the space to remember who you really are. I used to think silence meant safety, that being small was the only way to stay out of the line of fire. But growth is louder than grief. And healing? Healing is the loudest thing you'll ever do, even if no one claps for it. So I'll ask you this: Have you ever felt like the background character in your own life? What would it look like if you wrote yourself into the center again? If this story spoke to something in you, I'd love to hear it. Drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from, or just share your thoughts. And if it didn't resonate, that's okay too. Let me know why. Your story matters, and I'm here for all of it. If this video touched your heart, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Who knows? Maybe your story will be next.